Today we're on the fourth canto, chapter 6, and we're continuing the love story of Shiva and Shakti. We're going to see what happened further. If you've listened to the earlier episodes, you would know that a big, huge ceremony had taken place during which Shakti had self-immolated. But before I come to that, let me tell you the main lesson or learning that we're going to take away from today, and that is the idea of forgiveness. A lot of us struggle with forgiveness, and especially if someone's hurt us really deeply, especially if someone has been the cause of your loved one dying. That was the case for Shiva. His wife, Sati, had been, or had rather died, because of immense anger towards her father. And as such, it was unforgivable what had happened. It was unforgivable in every way. And we all face those situations where we come across something or someone who does so much harm to us, who hurts us so deeply, or hurts our loved ones so deeply, that what they do is unforgivable. You may have come across this in some situation or other in your life, and you may have not been able to let go the pain, the suffering, the hurt that was caused by that person. So how do you do it? And it's a very, very challenging topic. The very fact that somebody has that ability, that power, usually comes because it's regarding something or someone that we're attached to. And as long as we are attached, it is very hard to let go. We say we're going to forgive that person, but how can you really forgive? After all, you have been hurt. But if you dive deeper into what has been hurt, what really got hurt, usually, for the most part, for most examples that I can think of, and I'd love to hear your ideas on this. Maybe I'm thinking of some maybe I'm not covering all possibilities, but from what I can think of, usually it's because I'm attached to something as mine, someone as mine. Maybe it's my child, maybe it's my partner, maybe it's something that I own, or maybe it's myself. And somebody says or does something horrible towards that which I thought of as mine. And that causes me immense pain. Now, if it had happened to somebody else, it wouldn't cause me near as much pain. But if someone did that to me, then the pain is massive. So there are two things here in play. One is me, and the other is mine. And those two things are, according to so many spiritual teachers, the root cause of our suffering. If we take away me and mine, then what remains? You see, the me that I think of as me is not the soul. The me that I call me is my ego. It's the ego that is actually wounded, that is hurt, that is upset, that is angry. But what if you step away from that ego? I mean, it is natural to be upset. I'm not denying that. It is natural to get angry. We will all go there. I will go there. You will go there. We will all go there. But then we need that moment of pause where we can reflect and say, who's the one who's getting hurt? Oh, my ego is getting hurt. It didn't like the fact that someone said something to me or did something to something or to someone who I love. Okay, so my ego is feeling protective towards the other person as well. And that's because I'm attached to them. Okay. Well, thank you, ego, for telling me that you're so upset, you're so angry, you're so hurt, and you have every right to be. But I also want you to know that I exist separate from all of that reality, all of that story. For me, neither the ego is real, nor that which I own or possess or have is real, that which is mine. I see it all as part of this Leela, this story that I'm engaged in this lifetime. And while it does hurt, that is true, at the same time I want to have the opposite experience as well, of something that doesn't hurt, that just witnesses, that watches, that feels and experiences and enjoys even this experience of being hurt. There is a part of us that is actually enjoying the story of our life. It is the witness of our life. It's like you sitting in a movie theater watching your life. And it's a fascinating life. And there's a part of you that is the witness to that and is enjoying all of that. So let's take a look at what happens here in this story with Shiva and how he deals with something that hurt him massively. All right, so we'll begin with the Bhagavatam and the chapter 6. Now, just to give you a little recap for those of you that maybe missed out earlier, and I want to make sure that you catch up with all of this, please do watch the earlier episode. It's super important. So this is Shiva and his wife Sati. Sati fell in love with Shiva and they are eternal beloveds. These are some more pictures of Sati and her father Daksh, who is going to play a major role in this whole story, including today as well. He's going to be a major player in today's story. Daksh had inaugurated or set up a yagya. This is what a fire yagya looks like, and that's a priest there doing the yagya. In India, during marriages, they have such ceremonies. And they're also done for great auspiciousness and for good things to happen when somebody moves into a new house or any such situation, then they'll have a yagya. And this is a yagya as it was done during the time of Daksha with hundreds of people, priests and various others who are engaged in performing the yagya. And this is Sati, the daughter of Daksh, the wife of Shiva, self-immolating because she was so hurt, so upset, so angry with what her father was doing regarding her beloved, Shiva. When you love someone deeply, you cannot tolerate an insult to that person. And when you love them as Sati loved Shiva, she could not for one moment tolerate from anyone somebody speaking against her beloved. What to say of her own father speaking in that way? So when it became intolerable, her father's absolute, egregious, nasty, horrible behavior towards Shiva, she ultimately gave up her body and left. She said, this body that has been awarded to me by this father, I now give up this form. She knew she's going to come back. She is the eternal consort of Shiva. She would be back. So, the story continues. As you know earlier, the soldiers of Shiva had come and they had destroyed the entire yagya, the ceremony, the sacrifice that was being conducted by the father of Sati, Daksh. And in that, Daksh himself had been killed, his head had been severed and thrown into the fire. The people out there had been either killed or maimed or wounded by all the soldiers of Shiva. Shiva himself did not personally come at all. Now, after being defeated by the soldiers of Shiva, the Brahmins or the priests, the demigods, devas, they're also known to be the universal administrators of the universe. So they are the very powerful beings who are in charge of various aspects of the universe, the demigods. We'll come across that name again and again, so I want you to get familiar with that. So the devas or the demigods and other members of the sacrificial assembly approached Brahma. Now Brahma is considered the creator of the universe. He is not God. In the Vedic system, Brahma, or rather shall we say God, does not personally create or manage the universe. He has various beings who are created either as personal representations of himself or who are separate living beings such as Brahma, who are highly evolved beings and who manage the creation and the maintenance of the universe. He also comes personally as Vishnu, and in many ways one may understand he even comes as Shiva. So now we have that this yajna that is being performed. So yajnas were a way in which they would appease the human beings would appease the devas, the demigods, to be able to bless them with crops, with rain, with good sunshine, with good abundance of life and wealth and everything else. You see, God doesn't want to be involved in these matters. Human beings come to God, God, give me a new car, give me a new house, take care of my child, this is happening, that, solve my problems. And God's like, please, I mean, I can't handle 7 billion of you out here on this planet, 8 billion now, and billions more on other planets. You got to delegate this thing out. It's not going to happen, right? And so there are, according in the Vedic literatures, as many as 33 million demigods. People think, oh, there are 33 million gods. No, no, no. There are 33 million demigods. They are living entities like you and I who are empowered and who have arisen through their spiritual practices to a very high level. And now they are in charge of different affairs of the universe. Yeah, the CEO of the company doesn't go around doing all the work themselves. You have to delegate. It's not possible. So anyways, all of these people, the priests, the demigods, and other members of the thing approached Brahma, who was the creator of this universe, and every universe has its own Brahma, its own creator. And they were in great fear, and they narrated to him all that had happened. Brahma and Vishnu, so you have three people, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma does the creation, Vishnu maintains, and Shiva destroys. Typically that's their function. However, there's a lot of overlapping here, so you're going to get to see that. Brahma and Vishnu already knew about the events that were going to occur in the yajna. They could see the future. And therefore, they had not gone there. Yajna is the sacrificial ceremony that was taking place with fire and ghee and so many other offerings that are made in the fire. Anyway, Brahma sat and listened to these complaints, and after listening to them, he replied, he said, you know, guys, you can't be happy in executing a yajna or a ceremony of this kind if you blaspheme a great personality, such as Shiva, and thereby offend his lotus feet. You cannot have happiness in that way. I mean, in many ways, we can learn a lot from this. You cannot have happiness by causing the suffering of others, or by insulting others, or by putting down others. Though in the material world you'll find that's the case a lot of the time. One person's success or one person's happiness is often built upon the unhappiness of another, or someone else being put down while you're put up. Very often you'll find narcissistic people who will revel in putting down other people, who will enjoy thoroughly putting down others while making themselves appear grandiose. So Brahma continues, you have excluded Shiva, and therefore all of you are offenders. Still, if you let go your reservations, fall down at his lotus feet, and surrender unto him, he will be very pleased. So firstly, Shiva is not only a highly, highly exalted being who is beyond all living beings, beyond Brahma, beyond Indra, beyond every living being in this universe and amongst all other beings in all other planets. Shiva is in a separate, incredible category by himself. He is not considered the supreme Godhead, but nor is he a living entity. He is neither Param Atma, nor is he Jiva Atma. Although there are many who believe that Shiva is the source of everything. And although they believe that Shiva is Parabrahma, and although they believe he is God, and we're not going to dispute that. The Vedas say, and I'll just quote you that, is that Shiva and Vishnu is considered the supreme Godhead, Param Bhagavan, right? He is the ultimate Godhead. That Shiva and Vishnu are like milk and yogurt. What is yogurt made of? Milk. And what does milk turn into? Yogurt. So they're like indistinguishable from each other, and yet they are pathways to something very unique. Shiva, for many who meditate on him, you'll see all those who worship the impersonal aspects of the divine, who go through meditation, through the yogic process. If you've come across Sadhguru, or if you've come across so many other yogis, they will worship Shiva. Adi Yogi is how they call him. And those who are interested in God as personal, so the earlier path I mentioned was impersonal, energy, the universe, like that, so impersonal. And those who are interested in the personal path, the idea of God as a being, who want to have a loving relationship with God, they will come to Krishna. They're different paths. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, both paths lead to him. However, the question really for you as the seeker is, what do you want? If you are more interested in merging with the divine, becoming one with the divine, so be it. But consider the possibility of having a relationship. With whom? With a being that is not someone who's going to sit in the clouds and punish people and send them to hell. That's a false idea. But rather someone who is beautiful and adorable. That's what the name Krishna means. Who is all attractive. And who wants to have a loving relationship with you. A relationship of intimacy, as a lover, as a beloved, as a friend, even as your own as a child, and even as a parent, however you wish to relate to God. So now Brahma is pointing out that if you offend someone who is of the caliber of God or is beloved of God, then you are an offender. And yet when you go to someone like Shiva, who is so merciful and so compassionate and so kind, he will easily be pleased. Brahma then informed them that Shiva is so powerful that by his anger, all the planets and all the demigods, right, the controllers of the universe, can be destroyed immediately. In fact, at the end of the creation, that's what he does. Shiva is extremely sad, Brahma explained, because he has recently lost his dear wife due to the unkind words of her father, Daksha, his father-in-law. Under the circumstances, Brahma suggested it would behoove them to go at once and beg his pardon. Brahma said that no one, not even he himself, or Indra, the king of the demigods, nor all the sages, could possibly know how powerful Shiva is. Under the circumstances, who would dare to commit an offense at his lotus feet? Now Brahma took all of them with him and went to the abode of Shiva, known as Kailash. In India, there is a mountain. Well, rather it's actually in Tibet, and it's known as Kailash, Mount Kailash. This is a picture of Mount Kailash. Viewed from a little further away, it looks like this. This mountain has been said to be the abode of Shiva. Now, in an earlier part, when we were reading last time, we were reading about how Sati, the wife of Shiva, was hearing the demigods coming. And Prabhupada writes that that means that the abode of Shiva, or Kailash, is not on this earth, but actually in one of the heavenly planets. And that's why Sati was able to see and hear the demigods as they were flying in their vimanas, in their airplanes. So, what exactly is the mystery? I don't know. But this Mount Kailash that we have here, which is north of, or rather to the west of Tibet, is 21,778 feet high and is part of the Himalaya mountains. It is considered sacred in 4 religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon. Bon is another religion coming from Tibet. In the Ramayana, it is said that Ravan attempted to uproot Mount Kailash as a retaliation to Lord Shiva, who in turn pressed his big toe upon the mountain, trapping Ravan in between. In the Mahabharata, it is said that the Pandava brothers, along with their wife Draupadi, trekked to the summit. You saw that, how high that mountain is, right? It's one of the highest mountains. Trekked to the summit of Mount Kailash on their path to liberation, as it is considered to be a gateway to heaven, known as Svargalok. One description in the Vishnu Purana states that the 4 faces of the mountain are made of crystal, ruby, gold, and lapis lazuli. It is a pillar to the world and is located at the heart of the 6 mountain ranges, symbolizing a lotus. The Bhagavatam is going to give us a very different description of Kailash. It is not a place full of snow, but rather an extremely beautiful abode. So it says here in the Bhagavatam, Kailash, the abode of Shiva, is full of different herbs and vegetables. It is sanctified by Vedic hymns and mystic yoga practice. The residents of that abode are demigods by birth and have all mystic powers. Besides them, there are other human beings known as Kinnaras and Gandharvas. They are accompanied by their beautiful wives who are known as Apsaras, or perhaps in English you might say angels. But no, they don't have wings. They're just extremely, extremely beautiful. Kailash is full of mountains, filled with all kinds of valuable jewels and minerals, and surrounded by all varieties of valuable trees and plants. The top of the hill, well, here sometimes they talk of a hill and then they talk of a mountain, so I'm not sure about this, but I'll just read it as it is. The top of the hill is nicely decorated by various types of deer. There are many waterfalls, and in the mountains there are many beautiful caves in which the very beautiful wives of the mystics are found. There is always the rhythmical sound of the peacocks, sweet vibrations, and the bees humming. Cuckoos are always singing, and other birds whisper amongst themselves. There are tall trees with straight branches that appear to call the sweet birds, and when herds of elephants pass through the hills, it appears that the Kailash hill moves with them. When the waterfalls resound, it appears that Kailash does also. Kailash is decorated with various kinds of trees which produce flowers with fragrant aromas. Such a vivid description here. There are jackfruit, betel nut, blackberry, mango, bamboo, and many more, all decorating Kailash Hill. In fact, the list is so huge. Most of those that they mentioned, I didn't even know. I'd never heard the names before, so I've just kept the few. There are different kinds of lotus flowers, such as the golden lotus. The forest appears to be a decorated garden, and the small lakes are full of various kinds of birds who whisper very sweetly. There are many kinds of other animals like deer, monkeys, boars, lions, cows, donkeys, tigers, buffalo, and many other animals who are enjoying their lives. There are varieties of deer, including the deer which bears musk. Banana trees decorate the small hillside lakes. There is a small lake named Alaknanda in which Sati used to take her bath, and that lake is especially auspicious. All the devas, the demigods, seeing the beauty of Kailash. So remember, they're all coming here now. They're coming to visit and to meet with Shiva, all the demigods, the sages, and Brahma himself. So seeing the beauty of Kailash, they were struck with wonder at the great opulence to be found there. What is that opulence? Beauty. In that beautiful region known as Alka is a forest known as Saugandhika, full of fragrance because of the abundance of lotus flowers. It is full of varieties of flowers, fruits, and desire trees. Desire trees is a very interesting term. Desire trees are talked about regarding in the Vaikuntha planets, the planets of Krishna. And it says that there are trees there that can fulfill all one's desires. So you just go to the tree and whatever it is you want, you can have it. Of course, the beauty of places like this is that people don't want anything. Only the desireless people reach there. The desirous ones are all here, right? Full of desires we are, and with our desires we're always struggling to fulfill them. But here they speak of desire trees that fulfill everyone's desires. Such trees are found on the planet of Krishna called Krishna Loka, and thus the abodes of Krishna and Shiva appear to be very similar. In that celestial forest, Saugandhika, which was full of fragrance, there were many birds whose necks are colored reddish and whose sweet sounds mixed with the humming of the bees. The lakes were abundantly decorated with crying swans as well as strong-stemmed lotus flowers. There were also 2 rivers there named Nanda and Alaknanda, which were sanctified by the dust of the lotus feet of the Supreme Godhead Govinda. The celestial damsels or apsaras come down to those rivers in their airplanes called Vimana, with their husbands, and after sexual enjoyment, they enjoy the water and enjoy sprinkling their husbands with water. Now, it's very interesting to note about Vimanas. They've been talked about a lot in many of what people think of are made up stories in the shows like Ancient Aliens really talk about it a lot. But they're referencing the Vedas, and the Vedas do talk about airplanes that were used to travel all across the universe. Now, maybe these are UFOs, but the descriptions are very different. They're shown to be very beautiful. They're sometimes made of flowers. They're made of... But basically, Prabhupada writes here in the purport that Vimanas work on Vedic mantras, and they are used by the denizens, the inhabitants of the heavenly planets, for interplanetary travel. However, there is one realm that is beyond even Brahmalok, that is called Siddhalok, where those who are perfected beings live, and they can travel to any planet without airplanes. People such as Narad. Narad is able to go anywhere without any airplane. However, the demigods, the devas, they use these airplanes, these vimana. After the damsels of the heavenly planets bathe in the water, it becomes yellowish and fragrant due to the kumkum from their bodies. The kumkum is that reddish powder, and yellow is from the turmeric. They all smear that over their bodies, and then that goes off into the river. The airplanes of the heavenly denizens are bedecked with pearls, gold, and many valuable jewels. The heavenly denizens are compared to clouds in the sky, decorated with occasional flashes of electric lightning. Prabhupada writes in the purport that the flashes of electric lightning are the women dressed in their fine, beautiful jewelry, golden in color, that appears as they are flying by as electric lightning. Anyway, so the movement of all these airplanes of Vimanas, this atmospheric influence, unsettled the forest elephants who flocked together into the sandalwood forest. So sandalwood is found actually as a tree, and then they have entire forests. And there are some in India where you have sandalwood trees, and from which the sandalwood is obtained. So as they're flying over, the devas, the demigods, also saw the bathing ghat. The ghat is a place where you go for bathing, and they make like stairs going into the water. And those stairs were made of precious stones, and water was full of lotus flowers. So you'll notice that there are precious stones everywhere. That's because they're pretty normal in these heavenly planets. They're pretty rare out here, but they're very common out there. And then they came across something even more amazing, and I'm going to show you a picture first here. This is the great banyan. This is a tree that is located in Howrah near Calcutta. It is believed to be 250 years old. The entire garden is actually one tree that spans 19,000 square meters or 3.5 acres. And the tree is over 80 feet tall, making it one of the natural marvels of the world. It was recorded to be the largest tree specimen in the world in the Guinness Book of World Records. Now, why do I bring this up? Because that's out here. But they're in Kailash. Well, as they were flying over, they reached a place where there was a great banyan tree that was, a few acres, not 3.5 acres, but 800 miles high, and its branches spread over 600 miles around. The tree cast a shade which permanently cooled the temperature, yet there was no noise of birds. So there were no nests and no birds on it. And therefore it was the perfect place for mystic yogis to meditate. Shiva was sitting under that tree, and he appeared as grave as eternal time, and serious. Not grave in any bad way, but in a serious way. He appeared to have given up all anger. He was surrounded by saintly persons like Kuber and the 4 Kumaras, the sons of Brahma, who are all liberated souls. Shiva was situated in his perfection as master of the senses. That's what it is. Shiva is in complete mastery of his senses. And yet when anger was needed, then anger was used. But otherwise, he's back into his place of mastery. He's also the master of knowledge, knows everything. and the path of achieving perfection. He is the friend of the entire world. Vishwa Suhridam. Suhridam Sarvadehinam. That is the term used in the Gita. But the Vishwa Suhridam, that he is the friend of the entire world. And by virtue of his full affection, Vatsalya, like parental affection for everyone, he is also very auspicious. Lokamangalam is the word used. So he is known to be very, very auspicious. Lokamangalam. He was seated on a deerskin and was practicing all forms of austerity. Because his body was smeared with ashes, he looked like an evening cloud. On his hair was a symbolic representation of the half moon. He was seated on a straw mattress and speaking to all present, including the great sage Narad. So Narad, so many very highly evolved beings were present there with Shiva. His left leg was placed on his right thigh, and his right hand, and his right leg was placed on his left thigh. This is Virasan. And in his right hand he held Rudraksh beads. Now, all the sages and demigods headed by Indra offered their respectful obeisance unto Shiva with folded hands. Shiva was dressed in saffron garments and absorbed in trance. This is called Brahma Nirvana, Brahma Anand. That means he was completely free of any influence of this world. He was in that bliss called Brahma Ananda, that Ananda or that bliss that comes from the divine. He was situated in Samadhi, and therefore he was the foremost of all sages. Shiva's lotus feet are worshipped by both the demigods and asuras. Asuras are the ones who are against godly people, or atheists or demons, whatever you want to call them. But still, in spite of his exalted position, as soon as he saw Brahma, he immediately stood up and offered him respect by bowing down and touching his feet. Brahma is actually his father. All the sages were sitting with Shiva, such as Narad and others, and they also offered their respectful obeisance to Brahma. After being so worshipped, Brahma, smiling, began to speak to Shiva. He said, "My dear Shiva, I know that you are the controller of the entire material world. I know that you are the controller of the entire material manifestation, the combination. You are the father and mother of the cosmic manifestation. If you've ever seen the Shiva Lingam, that's what you'll see. There is the Lingam, which is considered the genitals of Shiva, and then the Yoni. So Lingam and Yogi together, that union of the two creates the manifest world. So Brahma is saying to him, I know that you are the controller of the entire material manifestation, the combined father and mother of the cosmic manifestation and the supreme Brahman beyond the cosmic manifestation as well. My dear Lord, you create this cosmic manifestation, maintain it, and annihilate it by the expansion of your personality, exactly as a spider creates, maintains, and winds up its web. My dear Shiva, you have introduced a system of yajna sacrifices through the agency of Daksha, and thus one may derive the benefits of religious activities and economic development. So you wonder, why do people do these yajnas? Why do they do these fire sacrifices and all this stuff? In ancient times, that is not the recommendation for this time, yajnas were done for this, for advancement in economic development and for the development of one's goodness or piety or purification of one's consciousness. So that's why they were done. That was the whole point. And they're not like an end-all. They're more for the beginner who is on their path towards spiritual awakening and enlightenment. In today's time, what is recommended is meditation, and particularly meditation on the name of God. The most powerful yajna for today's time, in the age that we live in, the age of Kali, which is full of so many disturbances, is to chant the names of God. Harer Nam, Harer Nam, Harer Nam, Eva Kevalam. To chant the names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Or God in any name that you know God. The point is that by chanting the name of God, the name is no different than God himself, and you are in touch with, in communion with God during that time. and thereby you will be immediately purified. O most auspicious one, Brahma is saying to Shiva, you have ordained the heavenly planets, the spiritual Vaikuntha planets, and the impersonal Brahman as their respective destinations for performance of auspicious activities. Devotees who have dedicated their lives unto your lotus feet certainly observe your presence as Paramatma, the Supersoul, in each and every being, and as such they do not differentiate between one living being and another. Such persons treat all living entities equally. They never become overwhelmed by anger like animals who can see nothing without differentiation. So the difference he's bringing up here is that animals, or the people in an animalistic level of consciousness, see everything and everyone as different. But an evolved spiritual being sees there is no difference between me and you. You and I are the same. Does it mean that we are one and the same? No, not quite. We are the same and yet we are different. You are unique. I am unique. My consciousness is unique. Your consciousness is unique. And yet we have something within us that is the same. The essence, the soul, is by nature the same. Whether you come across it in an animal or you come across it in a human, it is the same. It is that presence that makes that animal, that human, that plant grow. And when it leaves the body, that very creature stops functioning, its body stops functioning, and it drops down dead. So that is how you recognize. There's a whole question going on right now about what is AI and whether AI is conscious. And no, AI is not conscious. Just because it has intelligence doesn't make it conscious. It is very different than the soul. The soul is not just, we are not just the mind. We're not just our intelligence. Mana, buddhi, ahankar. These are the different stages mentioned. Mind, the intelligence, the ego. All that is part of this organism that we live in. This human being, this human body, mind organism that we live in. So just developing the intelligence is like developing the body. We've developed so many now tools for the body. Like for example, with cars, we're able to get around from one place to another. With airplanes, we can travel here and there. But what has that done? It has made us, what's the word where you sedentary people. And as sedentary people, we find so much obesity now. We find so many problems associated with that. Yes, we've got a lot of comfort. We can travel all over the world. We can fly and we can go on ships and we can go in cars. But it also has caused all kinds of other problems. It's polluted the world. It has caused all kinds of problems for us, accidents, and yeah. And ultimately, it has made us not use our body. So now we have to go to the gym. We have to go to some place to exercise. Because the normal thing that you did when you had to go from one place to another was you walked. That's how they did it for centuries. Then they finally came out with the bicycle, and then the bicycle went to the car. And then now we did things for the body, for the comfort of the body. Now we're doing things for the mind. We're trying to develop a super mind. But that super mind will also do the same thing. It will create the obesity of the mind. Watch and mark my words. It will create a laziness of the mind, because now all answers will come to you straight away through AI. You want to write an exam paper, boom, few seconds and you've got it. You want to do a presentation, few seconds, you've got it. That's the problem with our kind of advancement. And yet people wonder, in those circles especially, whether AI is conscious. No, it's not conscious. It can never be conscious. Just as the mind and the body are also not in and of themselves conscious. They have an intelligence. They have a lot to share that we can learn from them. But they are not consciousness. Consciousness enters the body and leaves the body. That consciousness is the soul. And that soul has particular qualities that people who study AI have no idea about, because they don't meditate. If you meditate, you recognize what those qualities are. Those are the qualities that are inherent within the soul: peacefulness, compassion, wisdom, love. These qualities cannot be found in an AI. Though it can mimic such things, it cannot feel them. It cannot experience them. But the level of, to the degree that we can feel them, if we take the time to go within and really experience what lies inside us. So I see this whole development as a wake-up call to find the real thing, to not be so enamored by the stuff the world is creating, but rather to use it as a chance to find the real consciousness. I digress. Let's get back to the story. Persons who observe everything with differentiation, that is to see everything is different. I'm different from you. This is different from me. This is your house. This is my house. Are simply attached to karmic activities. Such persons tend to be mean-minded. They are always pained to see the flourishing condition of others, and thus give distress to them by uttering harsh and piercing words. Such persons have already been killed by providence, and they appear to be alive, but they are like the walking dead. There is no need for them to be killed again by an exalted personality like you. So Brahma is indirectly telling Shiva, there's no need for you to have killed all those people. Actually, Shiva did not kill them. His soldiers did. But right. So anyway, Shiva being in charge of them is now going to be requested by Brahma. Brahma says, my dear Lord, when materialists are bewildered by Maya, the insurmountable illusory energy of God, they sometimes commit offenses. Isn't that true for all of us, right? We are also bewildered by Maya, this illusory energy of this world. And we sometimes commit offenses. We do things we shouldn't do, or we offend somebody, or we hurt someone. So Brahma says to him, a saintly person with compassion does not take this seriously, nor does he show his prowess to counteract them. You are never bewildered by the formidable influence of Maya. You are omniscient and should be merciful and compassionate towards those who are in illusion and attached to karmic activities. My dear Shiva, you are a shareholder of a portion of the sacrifice. See, the sacrifice that is being done, the yajna, they need to put Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva as the shareholders, beneficiaries of that sacrifice, as well as the various demigods. So he says, my dear Shiva, you are a shareholder of a portion of the sacrifice, and you are the giver of the result. So in other words, Shiva often blesses the person who has done that yajna, that sacrifice. The misguided priest did not deliver your share, and therefore you destroyed everything, and the sacrifice remains unfinished. Now please do the needful. By your mercy, may Daksha was the father of Sati, if you remember, may he get back his life. May Bhaga, who was one of the persons out there, get back his eyes, because his eyes had been pierced by the soldiers of Shiva. And may Brighu, whose mustache they had pulled off, get back his mustache. And Pusha, his teeth, because the Pusha had been smiling, very happy to see the insults being showered upon Shiva by Daksh. So the soldiers of Shiva had gone and bashed out his teeth, knocked them out. So Brahma is requesting, may they all get all of this back, and may the demigods and priests whose limbs have been broken by your soldiers recover from the injuries by your grace. Now, please take your portion of the yajna and let the sacrifice be completed by your grace. So Brahma is requesting Shiva. Shiva, being pacified by the words of Brahma, replied, my dear father, I do not mind the offenses created by the devas, the demigods. Because these demigods are childish and less intelligent, I do not take a serious view of their offenses, and I have punished them only in order to set them right. Prabhupada writes in the purport, Shiva's name is Ashutosh. He is always satisfied, and therefore he did not become angry or make anyone an enemy. He is not inimical to any living entity. So if you look at who was angry, it was the followers of Shiva when they saw Sati self-immolating because of the insults being heaped upon her by her father. So Shiva is not inimical to any living entity. Rather, he always wishes for the welfare of all. Whenever he chastises a person, it is like a father's punishment of his child. He never takes seriously any offense by any living entities, especially the demigods. Now, the problem was that since the head of Daksha has already been burned to ashes, Shiva said he will have the head of a goat. Prabhupada now makes a comment that's very interesting. He says, it appears from the exchange of Daksha's head. So, in other words, the fact that they could now replace Daksha's head with that of a goat It appears that the modern scientific theory that the brain substance is the cause of intelligence is not valid. The brain substance of Daksha and that of a goat are different, but Daksha still acted like himself, even though his head was replaced by that of a goat. By the way, you may notice that the same thing happened in the case of Ganesh. Ganesh also had his head chopped off because he tried to stop Shiva from going to meet with Shiva's wife Parvati. Now, Shiva had been gone a long time. Ganesh did not know that Shiva was his father. He thought he was an intruder, so he had tried to stop him because his mother was bathing. But his mother is also the wife of Shiva, and Ganesh did not know that. So Ganesh tried to stop Shiva. Shiva cut off his head. When Parvati came out from the water, from bathing, she says, what the world have you done? You've killed your own son. And Shiva was so upset and hurt and disappointed, and immediately said, the first living creature that walks by here, I will take the head of that creature and place it upon Ganesh. That happened to be an elephant. And so they transplanted the head of the elephant onto that of the boy Ganesh. That's why Ganesh has an elephant head. In this case, Daksha now has the head of a goat. And Prabhupada's pointing out that the intelligence is not in the brain, it is in the consciousness. The conclusion is that it is the particular consciousness of an individual which acts. The brain substance is only an instrument which has nothing to do with real intelligence. Of course, the brain should be functional. There's no doubt about that. The real intelligence, mind, and consciousness are part of the particular individual's soul. It will be found in the verses ahead that after Daksha's head was replaced by the goat's head, he was as intelligent as he had previously been. The same happened to King Bharat when he was reincarnated as a deer. By the way, that story is coming up later on in the Bhagavatam. He was a king, and when he reincarnated as a deer, he could remember his previous life as a king. Sometimes we have pets in our homes, like dogs and cats. Very often we notice how human-like they are. Perhaps they do remember what it was like. And perhaps they're just waiting to be able to come back to another chance of being human, where they can be elevated back again to be able to continue their spiritual practice. Prabhupada writes here that Krishna consciousness aims to purify one's consciousness. It doesn't matter what kind of brain one has, because if one simply transfers his consciousness from matter, right, in terms of being always fixated on matter or the body, if one transfers his consciousness from matter to Krishna, his life becomes successful. So that was the purport. And we continue with the Bhagavatam. The demigod Bhaga will be able to see his share of sacrifice through the eyes of Mitra. So now he's going to be able to see through the eyes of someone else. The demigod Pusa will be able to chew only through the teeth of his disciples. And if alone, he will have to satisfy himself by eating dough made from chickpea flour. All of these were actually to teach these people who were very proud and arrogant a lesson. So although they were given back the ability to eat in one case, the ability to see in one case, it was dependent upon others, so that they would develop a certain level of humility. Very often we experience problems in life, but the real reason we have suffering and we have problems is so that we may develop humility. We may realize we're not all of that. All of the problems of our life come down to this one simple thing. And because in humility we're able to please God, we're able to cry out to God, we're able to hear God. Then he continues, as for Bhrigu, he shall have the beard from the goat's head. All the personalities present were very much satisfied in heart and soul upon hearing the words of Shiva, who is the best among the benedictors. Prabhupada writes there, people generally go to Shiva because he is always quickly satisfied and gives benedictions to his devotees without consideration. He is therefore called the best of benedictors. In other words, he blesses and gives you what you want. Materialistic persons are always anxious to get material profit, but they are not serious about spiritual profit. Now, there's a little story where someone was really into praying to Shiva that he wanted a benediction, he wanted something so badly. And Shiva came to him in a dream and he said to him, you go to this one person, his name is Sanathan Goswami, and he will give you, he has got a touchstone and he will give it to you. A touchstone is something that you can take and you can touch anything with it and it turns to gold, especially metal. So this Brahmin was very pleased and excited. Oh my God, I'll become a multimillionaire. I'll have the touchstone. I can transform any kind of metal into gold, and I will be the richest man on earth. And he goes to Sanathan and he asks him, I heard in a dream Shiva came to me and said to me that you have a touchstone and I could get it from you. And Sanathan said, oh yeah, it's there. It's there in the trash. You can go get it from there. And this guy took the touchstone. He was very excited. He walked away. He was like, well, why did he keep it in the trash? He goes back to Sanathan and he asks him, well, why did you keep this in the trash? He says, because if you were to ask me what is the greatest benediction, it is not that. I have much greater things that I can give you. The greatest benediction I can give you is love of God. And that's what Shiva actually sent you to me for, so that you would get the real blessing. And so with that, the person decided he wanted to learn about that and find out and learn. And he was initiated by Sanathan Goswami and taught the mantra of Hare Krishna and given that lessons about love of God. Anyway, here are some fun pictures of Daksha with the goat head. And I found another interesting one that compared Daksha to an Egyptian god, Khnum, I guess is how you say it. Thereafter, Bhrigu, the chief of the great sages, invited Shiva to come to the sacrificial arena. So now that yajna, that sacrifice, is starting all over again. The demigods, the sages, along with Shiva and Brahma, all went to the place where the great yajna was being performed. After everything was executed exactly as directed by Shiva, Daksha's body was joined to the head of the animal meant to be killed in the sacrifice. When the animal's head was fixed on the body of King Daksha, Daksha was immediately brought to consciousness. And as he awakened from sleep, the king Daksha saw Shiva standing before him. At that moment, his heart, which had been polluted by the envy of Shiva, was immediately cleansed, just as the water in a lake is cleansed by autumn rains. Prabhupada writes in the purport, Shiva is called auspicious because if anyone sees him with devotion and reverence, his heart is immediately cleansed. King Daksha was polluted by envy of Shiva, and yet by seeing him with a little bit of love and devotion, his heart immediately became cleansed. In the rainy season, the reservoirs of water become dirty and muddy, but as soon as the autumn rain comes, all the water immediately becomes clear and transparent. Similarly, although Daksha's heart was impure because of his having slandered Shiva, for which he was severely punished, Daksha now came to consciousness, and just by seeing Shiva with veneration and respect, he became immediately purified. And here is a picture of Daksha with folded hands bowing down to Shiva. King Daksha wanted to offer prayers to Shiva, but as he remembered the terrible death of his daughter, Sati, his eyes filled with tears, his voice choked up, and he could not say anything. Afflicted by love and affection, Daksha awakened to his real senses. With great endeavor, he pacified his mind, checked his feelings, and with pure consciousness began to offer prayers to Shiva. He said, My dear Shiva, I committed a great offense against you, but you were so kind that instead of withdrawing your mercy, you have done me a great favor by punishing me. You and Vishnu never neglect even useless, unqualified Brahmins. Why then would you neglect me who am engaged in performing sacrifices and yajna for you? My dear, great and powerful Shiva, I did not know your full glories. For this reason I threw arrows of sharp words at you in the open assembly, although you did not take them into account. I was going down to hell because of my dishonoring you, who are the most respectable personality, but you took compassion upon me and saved me by awarding punishment. I request that you be pleased by your own mercy, since I cannot satisfy you with my words. Very often we experience difficult circumstances, and the devotee of God sees that as a blessing. Because through those difficulties, those adversities, we call out to Him. We ask for His help and we ask for His blessing. Sometimes that's the only time we call out. And, I hope that we don't have to go through difficult times to call out, that we call out to Him on a more regular basis. And therefore we don't need to go through difficult times. And even if they do come our way, they don't bother us anymore. Because He gives us, that is the real blessing, is when He gives us the power to be able to withstand all different circumstances in life without being affected. It's not that things won't happen, but it's that when we go through them, we're not affected by them. We're not bothered by them. Or even if we are, we're quickly able to pull ourselves out of that. Being pardoned by Shiva, King Daksh, with the permission of Brahma, again began the performance of the yajna along with great learned sages, priests, and others. In order to resume the activities of the yajna, the Brahmins firstly arranged to purify the arena of the contamination caused by the touch of Virabhadra. If you remember that demonic presence that came from Shiva and the other ghostly followers of Shiva. So all of that now, they purified the space. King Daksha offered the ghee, or the clarified butter, with mantras into the fire. And then there appeared Vishnu. He's seated upon his carrier, Garuda. There's another picture of him here as he comes in a different situation. And here's one of him with Lakshmi, his beloved, his partner. Then Vishnu appeared there in his original form as Narayan, seated on the shoulder of Garuda, the bird who had big wings. As soon as he appeared, all the directions were illuminated, diminishing the luster of Brahma and all others present. His complexion was blackish, his garment yellow like gold, and his helmet as dazzling as the sun. His hair was bluish in the color of black bees. His face was decorated with earrings. His 8 hands held a conch shell, wheel, club, lotus flower, arrow, bow, shield, and sword, and they were decorated with golden ornaments such as bangles and bracelets. His whole body resembled a blossoming tree, beautifully decorated with various kinds of flowers. Vishnu looked extraordinarily beautiful because Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, was with him. His face was beautifully decorated with a smile that can captivate the entire world. White chamara fans appeared on both sides of him like white swans, and the white canopy above him looked like the moon. Brahma, Shiva, the demigods, and all present there immediately offered their respectful obeisances by prostrating before him. In the presence of the glaring effulgence of Narayan's bodily luster, everyone stopped speaking. Fearful with awe and veneration, all present touched their hands to their heads and prepared to offer their prayers. So now they go on offering prayers, and as they do, I won't get into it because we're running out of time. Beautiful prayers. And then it says here, after Vishnu was glorified by all present, Daksha, his consciousness purified, arranged to begin with the yajna which had been devastated by the followers of Shiva. Vishnu is actually the enjoyer of all the results of all sacrifices, yet because of his being the Paramatma, the supersoul of all living entities, he was satisfied with his share of sacrificial offerings. Then he said to Daksha, he says, Daksha, I am the original personality of Godhead, but in order to create, maintain, and annihilate this cosmic manifestation, I act through my material energy, and according to different grades of activity, my representations are differently named. In other words, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, all are different manifestations coming from him. One who is not in proper knowledge thinks that Brahma and Shiva are independent, or he even thinks that the living entities are independent. A person with average intelligence does not think that the head and other parts of the body to be separate. So in other words, your head, your body are not separate from you. They're all part of you. And similarly, all these different beings are all part of the same Supreme Godhead. My devotee does not differentiate Vishnu, the all-pervading Godhead, from anything or any living entity. In other words, everything is God. Everywhere is God. He continued, Vishnu continued, one who knows that Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, as well as all living entities are not separate from the Supreme, and who knows Brahman, the original source, actually realizes peace. Others do not. Thus King Daksha, having nicely instructed by Vishnu, worshipped him and then began to separately worship Brahma and Shiva. With all respect, Daksha worshipped Shiva with his share of the remnants of the yajna, and then after this was finished, he worshipped Vishnu with the ritualistic performance of yajna as well. Then all of them were blessed. All the demigods who had assembled blessed Daksha that he might increase his piety, and then they left. Maitreya, who is narrating this entire incident, finally says to Vidura, who he's been narrating this entire story to, he says, I have heard that after giving up the body she had received from Daksh, Sati took her birth in the kingdom of the Himalayas. There's a whole other story behind that one. How she came and took birth in the kingdom of the Himalayas, and then eventually she meets up with Shiva and they get married. Ambika, goddess Durga, who was known as Dakshayani Sati, again accepted Shiva as her husband. I heard this story from Uddhav, a great devotee. If one hears and again narrates with faith and devotion this story of the Daksha Yajna, then certainly one is cleared of all contamination of material existence. All right, that was a long story. Let's get into questions. If there's any of you that have any questions, I'd love to hear from you now. If you can write them in the text or in the chat, or if you'd like to come and speak up, I'd love to have you speak over here. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions? What did you think of this whole story? Silly, thank you again for your questions. The nature of cosmic... Okay, I'll just bring it out here for all of you to read. Oh. The nature of cosmic manifestation is said to be of the creation and the essence of the Supreme Being playing out various experiences of life to intimately know its imaginings. Clarify for me what you're saying here. But yes, at this part I get that the Supreme Being is playing out various experiences of life so that we may intimately know God. In this case, I find it's about Shiva and his forgiveness and how he let go of all the immense hurt and pain that he was suffering. For a while he felt it, and then he let it go. Shiva felt deeply the loss of Sati, his wife. He felt deeply the pain of Daksha having brought that about. And yet, he didn't hold on to it. I think a big part of why we suffer is we hold on to our pain. We hold on to our suffering. We identify with it even. Some people become attached to that. They'll find groups of other people who are survivors of whatever it might be, the Holocaust. It might be survivors of rape, survivors of abuse, sexual abuse, survivors of, whatever it might be. And there is a benefit to that for sure. And it is healing, yes. And it is good to talk about the pain and suffering you've gone through. But it is not good to keep holding on to it. It is important at some point to release it, to feel it, to share it, and release it. Holding on to it doesn't serve us. Holding on to it only pollutes our entire mind-body organism and keeps us locked in a state of unhappiness. So, because the pain that we hold on to then afflicts our body. It afflicts our mind. It afflicts our happiness. It afflicts our relationships. It contaminates our entire experience of life. Can you imagine? We are giving so much power to the incident or the person who caused us pain. We are giving our life away to them. They've forgotten it. They've moved on. Or the incident has occurred, if it was something like being in a battle or whatever. If you were there where there was an earthquake, or you were there where there was a war, that thing's already done. It's gone. The Holocaust, it's gone. Yes, we can learn from it. Yes, we can try and make sure it never happens again. But it is important at some point to let it go and be free and live. Because you're a soul. That soul is having various experiences. Those experiences do not define who you are. Those experiences are not you. Your story is not you. You are much more than that. You are the soul within that has gone through many lifetimes of many different experiences, some good, some bad. All of that has been you. Why not hold on to the good ones as well? You have had both, and you have not, and you are and you are neither. You are not. There is no need to identify with either the good or the bad. I like this explanation even better. Seeley writes here. Seems the Vedas and later the Greek mythologies reflect the activities of the divine beings for better or worse, to know the true nature of what we are. I totally agree. And they also show us that even highly evolved beings do things that are not necessarily ideal or perfect or good, at least according to our thinking. There are many who will criticize Shiva. There are many who will criticize Krishna. There will be many who criticize even the most highly evolved beings. But the reality is, what you're criticizing is based upon some moral code you've picked up along the way. When such highly evolved beings do something, even that may seem unappealing to us, may seem not okay with us, there is always a learning behind it. There is deep wisdom behind it. They will never do it just like that. It's not from a place of reaction. It is not from a place of vindictiveness or even if there is a punishment, it is to learn something from it. It is never to try to condemn somebody. That is not the way of the divine. All right. Is there anything else? Anyone else want to share something? How about those in the Zoom chat? You have any questions? Gabriel, Swati, Rima, anyone? Write it down if you're feeling awkward about coming on the camera, or if you're okay to come and ask. That's another good observation. To forgive others is the same as forgiveness of ourselves, because we are all one. But the reality, Celia, is most people can't even forgive themselves. What to say of forgive others? I think the bigger lesson here, if you look at it, is can you take the wisdom out of that situation, the learning out of that situation, and then release it? Just like taking the pearl out of an oyster and letting go of the oyster. After all, what will help you going forward is not the pain, but is the wisdom. The wisdom to make sure that that doesn't happen again, right? To make sure that no one can do that again, or that those, because after all, we are somehow involved in that situation. I mean, there may be an abuser, but then also, did you stand up for yourself? Did you, I don't know. Sometimes you couldn't. Maybe as a child you couldn't. Maybe if you were facing someone who is a mass murderer or a psychopath, maybe you couldn't. But in most cases, in most average dealings, when we're adults at least, did you stand up to that person who said something? Or did you just let them do what they wanted and keep quiet? Sometimes it's important for us to stand up. Sometimes it's important for us to take action. Sometimes it's important for us to do what has to be done. Sometimes it's important for us to fight a battle like Krishna and Arjuna, right? When things just go beyond acceptable limits, right? Did you set boundaries? Did you, speak up for yourself? So many a time we have to look at, was I in any way contributing to the problem? Maybe you weren't. I'm not saying you were. But if there was something to learn or take away or do better next time, that's worth it. All right, think about it. If you have questions, please write them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you next time. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Jai Radhe. Shyam.